And we're back in our studio in San Francisco. Welcome back. And now we're going to have a panel discussion with three wonderful speakers. We're going to welcome Charlotte Cook, VP Gaming at Bitstack, Ronak Patel, Group Planning Director at TMWI, and Vanessa Goff-Yu, Marketing Director at Bitstack. And I believe we have the guys here with us now. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
It's so great to see all of you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So what's our geography here exactly? Where are you guys from? Where are you based?
London.
Second that, I'm in London.
Oh, wow.
Just outside London.
Well, not that international, but still London is a wonderful city. Been there many times, love it. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I believe you're going to talk about, well, game monetization and like what's happening with it right now with the current state of the game industry. And we're very excited to listen to your panel. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much. And thank you for having us again. As Alina said, my name is Vanessa Goff-Yu. I'm going to be moderating this panel. What we're going to be talking today is game monetization, specifically in-game advertising as one form of game monetization. So I've got Charlotte Cook, who Alina said, VP of Gaming at Bitstack, and also Ronak Patel from TMWI, who's the Group Planning Director at TMWI. Why don't you guys just give a bit of a flavour in terms of what your roles are within the organisation and what is your favourite game of all time? Ronak, let's start with you.
Okay. Thank you for having me again, Vanessa. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to quickly say I work for TMWI, and people who don't know who TMWI are, it's an award-winning marketing agency that specialises in the application of data-led advertising. So we do pride ourselves on data science, a deeper understanding of audiences, and creating the most relevant and balanced media plans for our clients. So one of the clients we'll talk about today is MG Cars, which we're very proud of to have. And in my role, particularly as a group planning director, it is to develop intelligent marketing strategies, delve deeper into audience profiling, the DNA of these individuals, and start to do a lot of more segmentation of our audiences, and deliver kind of disruptive innovation, things that are cool and kind of blue sky thinking, and basically trying to reach those users who we feel are going to be in market purchases for MG in particular. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. And what's your favorite game of all time?
Actually, it's a classic game. It's over 20 years old. It's Doom. And basically first-person shooter, playing a space marine, traveling around the planet and killing all sorts of things. So yeah, that's my one.
Amazing, thank you. And Shah, why don't you give a bit of a flavour of what we do at Bitstack, what your role is, and your favourite game of all time?
Yeah, so as Vanessa said, I'm Charlotte Cook. I'm the VP of Gaming at Bitstack. So essentially my role at Bitstack is working with games publishers and developers to identify suitable titles and opportunities that will work in line with our technology to allow advertisers to basically then place adverts in-game natively to monetize within the game. So the majority of my job is sort of, as I said, speaking with the publishers and developers to establish those deals, and also looking at, sort of esports packages and things like that to sort of extend the reach of the titles beyond just the game. That's something that we're very big on at Bitstack. I've worked in the games industry for nearly 10 years now. I love it, hence the length of time there. Previously worked at publishers like Sega and Take-Two and other service providers, working with the best publishers in the world. So very fortunate to have worked on some incredible IP in my career. I'm also a Women in Games ambassador, which is something that, I think is I'm very proud of to represent that side of the industry. Favorite game is always a tricky question. I think purely just because of the amount of my life I spent playing it, The Sims would have to be up there. But that's just purely like the amount of time invested in that title. I've been playing The Last of Us through lockdown. I got, my PlayStation set up quite early on so that I could capitalize on, not being able to go outside whilst we were locked down in London, and really enjoying that as well. So I think the storyline's really, really cool and really interesting, really emotional, which is, quite interesting for a game. So yeah.
Nice, very cool, awesome stuff. So let's get into kind of the nitty-gritty of this panel. Obviously, there's been a lot of different types of monetization methods and strategies being used for gaming, everything from obviously unit selling to merchandise sales, and obviously, in-game advertising as well. Ronat, let's come to you first. What do you think, or what have you seen are some of the more successful examples of game monetization that you've experienced?
Yeah, so it's exciting times at the moment in-game advertising, and the most successful example of game monetization for me at this moment has been Fortnite. And having Travis Scott, a US rapper, having an in-game virtual concert, it reached over 12 million people, which was massive. And that's a space where I think in-game advertising is going to be more prominent in the future. I also think, kind of product and brand placements in 2D gaming and virtual worlds is going to be really, really big. Stuff like billboards, skirtings, skinning buildings, cars. And I think brands like Coke, McDonald's, Red Bull, Exxon, they've really, really pushed the boundaries in those spaces and advertise in those games and spaces. And finally, I think esports, it's just humongous. Like the revenue generated predicted by 2023 is 1.5 billion globally. I mean, League of Legends, Fortnite, Dota 2, these are just, games that everybody gets in, like, a lot of people get involved as a professional career. So, Team Liquid, entered over 1,430 competitions and earned over 25 million. So people are seeing this area as a big space. And again, brands in different verticals, Intel, Comcast, Audi, are getting involved in kind of big sponsorships around that as well. So I think they're the kind of key areas for me.
Okay, so I guess, like, from your perspective, it's more sort of the audience engagement with that brand activation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that the relationship between brand and the environment is key. And if you can have a synergy between the environment you're in and the brand you're kind of pushing, you'll get more traction with this very highly engaged audience who spend a lot of time in game. And that's what I think is a good thing to do with these particular three areas.
Okay, cool. And Shah, what have you seen, and what do you think?
I think so. I think as a publisher, when you're developing a game, you're presented with a plethora of monetization options, and you have to be very mindful, especially nowadays. I think in my career, certainly the community element, as online platforms have become more established as the way to download games, play games, consume games, and therefore you have Discord channels, Twitch, which is less written and more verbal sort of reviews of games. I think publishers and developers have to really, when they're putting monetization strategies in, be mindful of their community. So to be very community focused, gameplay focused as well. I think they have to make sense within the mechanics of the game. It wouldn't make sense to have a skinned character with Coca-Cola running around a fantasy game. Yes, you might be earning $1 million for that, but does it fit with the gameplay style? So I think they have to be very mindful of the community and respectful of the environments, which is why this is only emerging, I think, now, when you're seeing it in environments where it makes sense, because that is something that the game publishers and developers do always pay very close attention to, their community and their players. So I think that's something that you need to consider. I think recent legislation and spotlighting on obviously the loot boxes is going to mean that we're going to see some sort of adjustments in monetization strategies, particularly in Europe, where there's been a big focus on that. So I think for me, if you're a publisher now, you need to look at monetization dexterity. You need to be looking at, what can I do for launch? What do I do to extend the life cycle of my game? And what do I do to keep my players engaged, as it's going on? And there's, DLC packs, upgrades, skins, all that kind of stuff. But then how can you layer that with other incremental monetization strategies, like in native in-game advertising, which would fit within the environment of a game that you're being able to monetize, but actually will not upset the player and sort of enhances the environment of the game. So I think it's all about layering them and making sure it fits within the context of the game, and also it makes sense for as I said, the mechanics of the game and with your community as well.
I think it's really interesting how you brought up community, because at the end of the day, publishers, everyone plays games or builds games because of the gamer and because of the experience. So yeah, I think that's an awesome point to shout out. Talking a little bit about spotlighting on in-game advertising, Shah, why do you think that there's been a spotlight being put on in-game advertising, or do you think it's coming?
I think obviously working at BidStack, we live and breathe it, because that's what we're doing day in, day out. And there's definitely been, in my sort of professional experience, an awakening as to, oh, cool, like there's this technology now that exists that enables me to do this without, the dev work that used to be required. So I think in the past, product placement in games, having sponsorship packages and stuff like that is very much something people wanted to do to enhance the realism of a sports game, a racing game. But sometimes the opportunity cost of developing that versus actually doing it would have been too much, and you might have passed up that opportunity and maybe looked at actually doing something more in the real world, a collaboration on an advert or whatever it might have been. But I think now with the technology piece being there to enable it to happen, and programmatic advertising being the prominent way that ad spend is generated and driven, I think that what you've ended up with is this, sort of almost a perfect storm of the two coming together, which means actually the spotlight has increased because now it's possible, and it's possible to developers and publishers of all sizes. So you could be an independent, one-man band developing a Unity title for mobile, and you can use this tech, or you could be a huge AAA studio who's running on a custom engine, who's going to need a bespoke integration, and you could also do it. So I think the barrier to entry is very low because of the tech, and it can be utilized and harnessed by anyone now, as long as the game is right, which is the mantra we have. I think for us, we want this to be used in games that make sense, like we were just saying before, about monetization strategies. So yeah, I think it's the perfect storm. I think that the technology piece is opened it and lowered the barrier to entry, so we should see more and more of this being built into those monetization strategies.
And I think it's also fair to say, obviously from a BidStack perspective, our technology has the dev cycle in mind and the IP in mind as well, in terms of when we actually built our end-to-end proprietary tech. So would you be able to kind of expand a little bit more in terms of that, how like what considerations we've had in order to build an SDK that fits in quite frictionlessly and seamlessly?
Yeah, well, I think so. For us, it was all about making the SDK lightweight, so that it isn't this big onerous piece of tech that you've got to put into the game, which is going to take up a lot of dev resource and time. So that was a big consideration. I know the team in Riga worked very hard on getting the SDK to be as lightweight as it possibly could for the different engines that we can support and the different platforms. So that's one thing. And as you said, I think dev cycle. When we speak to publishers and developers, we very much look at the flow of updates if it's a game that's already released, and where could it slot in there, and where would make the most sense. And then we tie that up with the way that the advertising sales team are lining up brands for those periods. So how do we integrate and activate as quickly as possible? So if we know that they've got an update, every quarter they're doing updates, and that's when we could fit into the next patch release. Okay, well then, the ad team know that they're working to that deadline to start selling the adverts for when that goes live. So I think the synergies between us all really come together, our tech team being on hand to support developers through it, because for most of them, this is the first time they will have done an integration like this. But also the one-time nature of it, so that once it's in your game, it's in and you can activate it, and the way you can switch things out dynamically, and you can do targeting by region or time. So you could be showing ads for cereal in the morning if it made sense, but then in the evening, have Domino's or Deliveroo, whatever, so that it's more time-based and relevant. And I think that's another thing that's been really interesting to publishers, is the way that it's not just going to be a universal campaign that anyone around the world is going to see. If I'm playing in London and someone's playing in North America, the ads will be relevant to me as a player. So it's another layer of not breaking the immersion. I think that's something that we've been really mindful of, the one time, the lightweightness, and then the support around that. So that ultimately, once you've integrated and activated, you can start earning revenue, very, very quickly from this.
Cool. So Ronak, from your perspective, like talking about Spotlight, why do you think advertisers and brands now are interested in activating in games?
I think Charlotte's covered a lot of the technical kind of prowess of this, and actually the broader conversation is about publicity. It is literally about the technology has now caught up, the real-time nature of programmatic, being able to put these ads and switch these ads quite quickly as an advertiser is really prominent. And I think things like just movies like Ready Player One, it generated over 600 million globally. It's a Steven Spielberg movie. It got people's imagination about virtual worlds and in-game, and how brands can actually start to interweave into those worlds. And I think even look at mobile gaming, which is mass market. Angry Birds, Rovio games, they made 290 million last year in euros. And things like Flappy Birds and all these games which are now reaching housewives and younger audiences. The whole conversation, the category is actually expanding beyond just being sophisticated gamers having access to in-game advertising. And I think that is actually the biggest thing in terms of the technology is catching up. Great. The advertiser understanding there's more opportunity to reach a bigger audience. Amazing. And actually younger audiences are the future, so we need to be engaging with them. So I think there's a bigger and broader category subject here, and I think that's becoming more apparent, especially during lockdown, and people's time spent has been gaming, streaming movies, box sets, at home with families, playing on other different devices, from consoles all the way to like Switch, etc. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So would you be able to kind of talk a little bit about what TMWI's approach to in-game advertising is? And maybe if you can give us a couple of examples of campaigns that you've run, specifically with in-game advertising in mind.
Yeah, so I think, at TMWI, we really try to delve into the data of our audiences to understand, what is that telling us, and what we realize in particular with in-game advertising from our audience management platform, where we did look at device IDs and cookies for MG. We saw an opportunity with in-game and actually reaching a younger male audience. We kind of then layered that with obviously what's happening in the market at the moment. The UK is the 6th largest video games market globally. It's worth $5.3 billion. Average time spent for a gamer is 14 hours plus per week. And 30 million people play games. I mean, why wouldn't we do this? It's massive against millennials as well, and it skews that way. And one quote I've seen is half of young males would quit their daytime job to become a pro gamer, that's a job of choice that they want now. So it's really interesting. And I think from our point of view, we basically wanted to look at MG's data, and it kind of started to talk to us and say, right, okay, these people are interested in gaming, they're interested in football and cars or automotive, and then we kind of took that discussion to Bidstack, and Bidstack opened up all the kind of different solutions and kind of blue sky thinking, and we started to home in on this word of native placements and being naturally fitting within the right gaming environment. And we started to look at the opportunity between Football Manager and Dirt Rally, and started to explore the different opportunities within those games, to really focus on one of our cars, which we were struggling to, not struggling to sell, but had issues selling, which was the MG3 hatchback. So that's kind of where the conversation started, and that's where we went to. And Bidstack have helped us to evolve these amazing kind of in-game advertising formats and opportunities with billboards and flags and skirtings and skinning cars. and really immersive experience. And the client was really, really blown away with not just the integration of the adverts, the creative choice that BidStack helped to manifest in these environments, but also we also discussed things like brand tracking, and they were able to do what they call a Lumen report, which was to kind of look at brand sentiment and also look at things like eye tracking. And it was really, really an enjoyable project, and it worked really well for us.
Okay, awesome. Conscious of time, so Shah, let's kind of evolve the conversation a little bit more. And what kind of considerations do you think game publishers need to have a think around in terms of monetization of potential ad spaces within their game?
I think first and foremost, is it right for your game? So is the game going to have the right environment for native in-game placements? So we tend to work with games that are sports focused, so stadium environments, racing games, and then open world games, so games where you might have like a cityscape with billboards. I always say think Spider-Man, which is, you know, a classic example of that. So I think you have to think about, is my game the right fit, and is this going to work with the audience in my community that I'm working with. I think also think about layering it on top of other ad monetization strategies that you might already have in place. So, you know, you may already be doing rewarded video or banners or interstitials, and the native in-game piece can work alongside those. So, you know, how's that going to fit in amongst those? Also, I think considerations around, you know, are you a licensed product? So do you have official licensors? That would mean you would have quite significant restrictions. That's not to say that it's impossible. Actually, BidStack's tech can work with you to place you know, you could use this for your licensed ads, for example, your house ads. So, but, you know, being aware of any restrictions that you may have that may need to be navigated when you go down this route of looking at it as a channel. And then I guess, yeah, ultimately, can it feed into other monetization strategies? So can doing native in-game advertising then also layer up into potentially things you're doing maybe around Twitch integrations or esports programs or tournaments, you know, and actually could BidStack work with you beyond just the native piece? So I'd say there's you know, it sounds like a lot of things to consider, but I think that the ultimate thing is my game the right kind of game for these placements? And then the opportunities that we can build around that, you know, ultimately can build a monetization strategy in itself, but as I said, that can also complement existing ones. You know, so you have this incremental revenue piece that fits within your game environment, and you know, brings premium brands like MG to video games and to your game in a relevant contextual way.
Okay, cool. So flipping, like looking at it from the other side of the coin, what more could be done to attract, in your opinion, more premium brands to the gaming environment? Oh, Ronak, I think your mic's muted.
Sorry, apologies about that.
That's okay.
I think publicity is a big thing, and I think more visibility on just the availability and options within in-game advertising. So what type of inventory formats? I think a key thing is actually audiences. People are talking about audiences now. They're talking about how to engage people, what the conversations need to be, but people don't understand what type of audiences you can get within these games. They have a top line overview of it, but we need to know the nuances of people within those games as well. And I think showing accountability and measurement is really key. You know, brand uplift studies that BidStack have done for us as well have been very, very insightful. And as I said, the eye tracking and the brand sentiment was allow us to see the barometer in terms of the shift in perception from a younger audience when they're actually playing these games and seeing this native ads within these environments. And I think more control over buying and planning and the site of reporting. So BidStack allow us to have integrations with DSPs, so we can purchase and see what available inventory there is. And it gives that control back to the advertiser, and that's really key. And I think what's another big thing is discussing, you know, kind of, you know, first party data. And that's really key, you know, non-ad blocked inventory. This is, you know, what you see is kind of what there is there available. Nobody else can be in that environment. So it's really, really key to kind of have some of those things in there.
Okay, cool. So final question before we go to the Q&A. Ronak, what top 2 tips can you give to game publishers when they're looking to partner with an in-game advertising platform like Bitstack?
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of, pricing's a key thing. As Charlotte said before, there was a lot of skepticism about, you know, things back in the day. It was hard coding. There was a lot of dev time, lead times, and the cost was astronomical. So being more transparent about actually costs which are comparable to other media, such as CPM prices for display, social, out of home, that could start to ease the conversations, and people won't be so fearful of the overhead costs. I think another thing is definitely understanding your audiences and making them more transparent to the industry, and packaging it in a way that's easy to dissect, and some insights to understand exactly what that might be is another way to do that. And I'll say the final thing, and it's very interesting, is always innovate and offer betas and first options to people. That's a great way for developers to get advertisers on board. They're my 3 key things.
Great. Shah?
I think I've probably said it already. Is your game right? So, you know, first and foremost, if you want to work with a company like Bitstack, do you have the right kind of inventory and title to be doing that? So have a think about that. And secondly, I think about what kind of service you want. The beauty of a company like Bitstack and being a startup is we're agile, we're dynamic, and we can work with clients in, you know, varying ways. So are you someone who wants a fully managed service, so that our team work with people like Ronak, you know, bringing you those opportunities through our network, so that you can activate with, you know, brands who are looking to do and innovate, like, you know, Ronak said? Or actually, are you someone who, you know, wants to utilize the technology, but, you know, you have brands and elements on your side already? So, you know, I think about what it is you're looking to build. But I think the fully managed service we offer on a global level and the sort of brands we can bring, you know, I think if you want to develop your game to enable those premium adverts to be there, you know, then that's something that the Bitstack can bring. So I think just having that in mind, and also, you know, building potentially, if you're someone who's developing a game, could you develop it to now think of in-game advertising as part of a development piece? So does this become something that now, when you're developing games, actually you build inventory into games because you know there is the technology and the appetite there to monetize that, whereas in the past maybe that wasn't the case? So, you know, can you do that now? Can you build this into your development strategy?
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand it back over to Alina.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for wonderful discussion today. We've learned a lot of things, including your favorite games, which was fun as well. Thanks for sharing everything with us. We have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. The very first one from Natalie Furness. She mentioned that it was great to learn about the MJ example, and wondering what basically what TNWI are looking to do next. What would you like to?
Hi there. Yeah, that's a great question, and we have quite, you know, we're focusing on in-game advertising. I think that's an area that we want to explore, and we're having lots of conversations with Bitstack at the moment to kind of do more innovative and more exploratory work, I guess. Research is a big thing we want to do with Bitstack as well, and understand more about the audiences, and understand what kind of consumer engagement they would need, and what type of content that they and advertising opportunities that they would need as well. So we're really focusing on that area, as well as things like VR. We want to explore those areas, and in-app development and in-app gaming as well.
Thank you very much. And what do you, like you mentioned the VR, going into that kind of area, what do you think the future holds for it? There are a lot of discussions regarding that, but what's your opinion?
I think it is the future, with HTC Vive, with, you know, kind of with lots of different providers out there actually getting into that space. Oculus, I have an Oculus myself, and I had a PlayStation VR as well. So I had both, and I love it. I think the future is when the technology is even more adapt to the environment that we're in at the moment. Rendering is becoming less, CPUs and processing is becoming quicker, data is being extracted quicker as well, and I think it's just blue sky visions at the moment. You know, these metaverse is a big thing that everybody's talking about, and homogenizing all these different virtual reality worlds together, and I think that's going to be just blown your mind in the future, and I can't wait to experiment and look at that with people like Bidstack, who are going to programmatically, you know, insert advertising opportunities for brands like MG and other brands that we have, and it's a very exciting world at the moment.
Yeah, well, it does sound very exciting. Can't wait for that as well. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to our next question. You know, you guys genuinely mentioned that during the lockdown there has been a big increase in terms of players joining games and spending more and more times. More hours playing, which basically attracts a lot of attention from the brands and other companies. Do you think this will change by the end of the year, when actually the lockdown is hopefully finished soon and everyone is get back to normal life? What do you think?
I think there's been there was a report this week, I think, that came out that was saying that they didn't think that there was going to be a significant shift, that actually it's become so much a part of people's sort of consumption of entertainment now that will continue. And I think the games industry, I think that's true. And you look at some of the games that are scheduled to come out, obviously next gen consoles coming later this year. You know, when you have that, you always have a massive spike in people playing because they want to get the latest console, they want to play the latest titles that are attributed to that. So I would say, you know, definitely for the remainder of this year, I think with that coming out and the amount of people I know who are literally like handing over their credit cards ready to buy a PS5, you know, that those people will spend a lot of time in game as well. So I would say, I think naturally you might have a slight decline as people start returning to the office and, you know, are able to do more activities outside. But it was really interesting, the report earlier this week that said they think it is becoming more of a mainstream media consumption now for people, which I would agree with.
And I also think, like, in terms of people from the outside looking in, the general perception of gaming has also changed quite drastically as well. I mean, just in the UK, gaming addiction was classified as a mental disorder that can actually be cured on the National Health Service. Within a couple of months, the government changed its attitude, and we actually worked with the Department of Culture and Media Services in the UK to actually run a campaign for them to say "Stay Home, Save Lives," which was right at the start of lockdown. So I think gaming has really shown the positive power that it has, not just, you know, for gamers, but as a society as well. I think that's quite strong and powerful for us to take forward post-COVID.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very interesting to know how actually in different countries, government changed their perception of the same thing, that even like half a year ago was completely different. Oh, well, let's see what happens then. All right, another question. You know that there is a general feeling that people are tired of ads. Do you think there is any break point at some point? Like, how do you get through the ad blindness? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from a gaming perspective, I can understand why ads can be seen as you know, disruptive and intrusive, and I think there are examples where that is the case. And I think the beauty of this and the sort of the concept behind it is that it should just be emulating where ads would exist in the real world anyway. So you know, if you are watching a football match, you do have pitch side hoardings. If you are watching a Grand Prix, you will have the hoardings around the track. So it shouldn't be something that is breaking even your mental perception of what that would be like in the real world. So I think I totally get where ad blindness can become a thing where you're constantly being interrupted or disrupted, and it actually sort of breaks the immersion. But I think with native, what you have is, it can exist, but it can exist seamlessly within the environment. And I think that's probably, I mean, Ronak could advise more, but I think that's probably where it's appealing to advertisers as well, because I think they're probably quite aware of this, you know, ad blindness, as you say, and this ad blocking culture. And, you know, lots of this younger audience moving away from, you know, traditional platforms where display media would exist to actually platforms where there isn't any, you know, and how do we still serve adverts to this young emerging audience, but, you know, without, you know, breaking that immersion of the experience.
I agree with you, Charlotte. I think relevancy is key, and real world into gaming world or virtual world and that kind of transition has to be seamless. So when you are playing GTA and you're, you know, driving your vehicle and you get out and you see a KFC and you run in and you get a power up and you get a burger and, you know, and you get back in a car and you carry on. That's the kind of fluidity that you need and seamlessness. And I think, you know, when you look at open world kind of and skinning buildings with brand logos, etc., it's becoming normal. I mean, even if you watched a film like Blade Runner 2049, advertising is coming out at you 3D. It's the same principle in VR, where you will be, you know, experiencing this virtual world and you'll have advertising all around you. Just it'll become normal. But what will happen is that you'll be able to pick and choose and select through your audience preference what you would like to see. And I think that's one of the biggest differences at TMWI. We start to recognize preferences, and through the insights and the data on our audience management platform, real nuances of audiences. And I think with BidStack, you have the opportunity to, you know, stop certain types of advertising being displayed within gaming environments, but also have a discussion, a really meaningful and one-to-one discussion about actually what is relevant. Is this brand actually going to fit within this environment? Does it make sense? Or is it just shoehorning something for the you know, hell of it? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a measured and planned approach that we need, and a well thought out, but data is helping us to kind of unravel that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your answers. I believe the time is up, sadly, but I know that there are more questions for you guys in the chat by the stream window. Please, if you have time after the session, please jump in the chat and have a few words with the guys. Thanks very much for joining us today. It was fantastic to have you in the studio. Hopefully soon in London or elsewhere. We'll